What are some creepy stories from your culture? Oh, I've got some nice ones from the Druvenstreek in Belgium. Toe cutters, Tennenschneiders, who cut off children's toes when they walk barefoot through a field. The black dog, werewolf, local variant, who jumps on your back, then you have to carry him to a graveyard where he jumps off. Loder met die kite, Loder with his chains, a BDSM enthusiast who follows you when you're all alone at night, rattling his chains to scare you and being a general very similar to aforementioned werewolf. Seraput monster, or something similar like putduivel, greenhouse well monsters. A monster that lives under the kids' greenhouse wells and pulls in children, then drowns and devours them. The ruins of a monastery in the Sonian forest that was burned to the ground, where it's said you can still hear the monks' nuns chant in the night. Dogen, the eyes, a phenomenon where you suddenly get enveloped by smoke, see a bunch of eyes and some burning people, possibly connected to the monastery if you look at the description of burning people in the Sonian forest, and a lot of witches, white wise, ghosts, bandits, etc. The wild hunt even made a pass through my village. How to prevent them? Simple. Make a cross, carry a crucifix, listen to your parents and the parish priest, and don't be a child. Not necessarily creepy, but interesting nonetheless. No, I think those are pretty creepy, yeah. The Brothers Grimm collected stories of folklore throughout Germany during the 19th century. Among them are plenty of famous and often dark fairy tales. One example is the famous story of the Pied Piper of Hamelin. During the 13th century, the city of Hamelin suffered from a great rat plague. The people of Hamelin were out of their wits. One day, though, a stranger in colourful clothes appeared and promised them to rid them of the rats for an appropriate payment. The citizens agreed and promised him a generous reward if he succeeded. The stranger was a skillful piper and played a melody on his flute that made the rats and mice of the city gather around him. Enchanted by his music, they followed him when he stepped into a nearby river where they drowned. The piper had fulfilled his promise, but the people of Hamelin denied him his reward. The stranger left angrily and without payment. Sometime later, though, he returned and played his flute once more. This time, it was the children of Hamelin that fell under his tune's spell. He led them out of the town and into a cave under a mountain. Only 2 of the children returned, one blind, one mute, unable to tell where they had been. None of the other children were ever seen again. There are plenty of variations of this old folktale, but the gist usually remains the same. There was a version circulating among history geeks in Berlin that the town sold the other children into slavery to make it through a tough year, and the story was to cover up their absence. No idea about the validity of this, but somehow creepier than the piper. Don't look up trees when you are out walking at night. A virgin ghost that will suck the life out of you sits up there waiting for you to look up. When a person is asleep, their soul leaves their body. If you paint or draw on a sleeping person's face, their soul will not recognize them and be unable to jump back into the body. Assassination must be really easy in Indonesia. Nakan, a man that sits by a body of water, usually rivers, and plays his violin to lure children into the water. Maren, a woman born on Friday the 25th of December. She sneaks into your room at night and kills you, but she has some OCD of sorts and you can fend her off by leaving a pile of cow hair on your windowsill. She'll have to count them all, which hopefully leaves you with enough time to wake up. You forgot the part where Nakan teaches a man to play his tune but doesn't teach him how to stop. So, at a wedding, the fiddler plays his tune and everyone starts dancing, but he can't stop playing and they can't stop dancing, so they dance until their feet start bleeding, until they wear their legs to stumps, until there is nothing left of them but bloody stains on the ground. Maren is typically what you see during sleep paralysis. She sits on your chest, bringing anguish and suffocation. Yeah, I think that's also similar to Maren, which is where we get nightmare from in English, I think. It's not really a story, but I'm Woodlands Cree, Native American, and we have a strict rule to not whistle when the northern lights are out. Why don't you whistle with the northern lights out? Oh, sorry, I'm slow. Okay, so it's believed that the northern lights are a window to the spirit world, and if you whistle at them, you can run the risk of getting the attention of the spirits who reside there, the most common consequence being that they'll come and sweep you up to join them in the afterlife. But my family also has a story about how my great uncle got severely burnt after he whistled at them. Tokolshe in southern Africa. The creature itself didn't scare me, but seeing how genuinely fearful grown men in villages got at even the suggestion of the creature was terrifying. Something very unnerving about seeing what true belief of these small demonic kind of creatures was. The culture of witch doctors and rituals was very, very, very strong and real to many people. I once saw a school teacher run out of class screaming bloody murder and never came back to school after some kids joked about cursing her with one. Seeing people grow up in small villages without internet, it's easy to see how things spread, and along with no modern medicine or doctors, deaths often come with more spooky causes such as a witch or demon rather than an explained disease. Some rash forming, probably a demon possessing you rather than the fact you got an infection from a spider bite. 3 I can think of. Roku Ro Kubi was a woman during the day, but when they would sleep, their neck would stretch to incredible lengths and roam around freely, drinking either blood or sometimes eating humans. Bake Kujira, or ghost whale, a huge ghost-like whale skeleton that is followed by a flock of birds or fish. They appear on rainy nights near the coastal whale villages, scaring and placing a curse on anyone who sees it. The curse would bring famine, plague, fire, and all various kinds of disasters to the village that sees it. Jorogumo. In Japanese folklore, this is a magical 400-year-old giant spider that can change its appearance into a beautiful woman. She will seduce young handsome men, wrap them up in her web, and eat them. These 3 are also known as yukai. Japanese folklore is cheating. They've got all kinds of weird shit. Not really creepy, but in Easter we go to our grandma's house and put leaves on the driveway and wait for the priest to come ringing a bell and holding a cross with Jesus on it, and we all take turns kissing Jesus. Thank God we didn't have to do it this year because of COVID. Portugal? Yep. The rat-battling horse skull of South Wales. The Mari Lwyd is a way-sailing folk custom in South Wales. The tradition entails the use of an eponymous hobby horse, which is made from a horse's skull mounted on a pole and carried by an individual hidden under a sackcloth. It represents a regional variation of a hooded animal tradition that appears throughout Great Britain. The custom was first recorded in 1800, with subsequent accounts of it being produced into the early 20th century. According to these, the Mari Lwyd was a tradition performed at Christmas time by groups of men. They would form into teams to accompany the horse on its travels around the local area, and although the makeup of such groups varied, they typically included an individual to carry the horse, a leader, and individuals dressed as stock characters such as Punch and Judy. The team would carry the Mari Lwyd to local houses, where they would request entry through the medium of song. The householders would be expected to deny them entry, again through song, and the 2 sides would continue their responses to one another in this manner. If the householders eventually relented, then the team would be permitted entry and given food and drink. La Llorona. If you're Mexican, you know her story. If you're not, let me tell you then. La Llorona was from Mexico, who had given birth to twins, but the father left them, so that meant she had to take care of them herself, but she couldn't handle their crying, so she drowned them in a river somewhere. But she didn't mean to kill them, but it was too late. They were dead. Then, later on, she killed herself, and people were saying that you could hear her in the streets saying, "Mi hijos," and crying loudly. Most parents use it as a lesson to teach them, or she will kill you. I've heard of La Llorona. I prefer that one guy who whistles though. I can't remember his name off the top of my head, but I recall that he whistles a certain tune, and if he sounds far away, he's actually close to you. Now that is actually terrifying. Ah yes, El Subon, the Whistler. I remember the thread of a guy who apparently had an encounter with it in a lake and filmed the whole thing. I like that one too, but La Llorona is more of a loud weep between sorrow, grief and hate. Not by all means a good spirit either. I personally like La Pascualita. She was a beautiful young woman that was going to marry, and her mom owned a wedding gown shop in Chihuahua, Mexico. The day of the wedding, she got bit by a venomous animal. Some say a scorpion, some others say it was a black widow. She didn't make it and passed away. Months went by and the mother of the girl brought up a new mannequin from France. The mannequin had an incredible resemblance to her daughter, and unlike any other mannequins, had a proper human shape and many small fine details like nails, crevices on the hands, and even what at some point seemed to be fingerprints. The people realized the resemblance between the mannequin and the lost daughter and assumed the woman had embalmed her and put her in display to make her grief easier to bear with. When they asked the the owner if it was the case. She never answered. This was all the way back in the 1930s, and the mannequin is still up in that store. I've seen it, and it's really pretty, although clearly time has passed on it. They say at night it moves and changes position as she prefers. The penis taker. He takes your penis. Thanks for the clarification. I almost didn't understand. 1. Krampus. 2. A legend about a glacier from my region. Some farmers got so rich with their land that they used pure silver as cowbells, bathed in cow's milk, and they made their streets from cheese and butter so the devil may have something to eat as well. At some point, a poor traveller showed up at their doorstep asking for shelter, and they cussed him away, shouting, "The devil shall give you shelter." But then thick clouds came towards them from the mountains, called the Devil's Horns. They do look like the name suggests, and it started to snow heavily. The farmers tried to make their way down to the valley, but they never made it, and their wealth and houses got crushed below the eternal ice. There is a Mongolian myth. My grandma told me this when we were at the countryside where there's very little human interaction. She told me that after it's dark or you go outside alone while herding, if you go far enough to not see the chimney of the yurt you're living at, a ghost or a spirit comes, makes you faint and have a seizure. The way you know the ghost is near is when an animal of your herd starts to have a seizure and their mouth bubbles up. If you're fast enough and see the chimney of your yurt, you may be able to avoid the spirit, but most likely by the time you realize what's going on, you're goners. I don't remember if you die by the end of it or it just left there. Even so, it was a pretty creepy story when she told me about it, especially when it was after sunset. Small town in upstate New York. There used to be a train station there back when people actually took passenger trains anywhere in rural areas. Fairly well-off guy, well known in town, comes racing into the station right before midnight. Seconds later, a huge old-fashioned jet black train with nobody aboard, I mean nobody, rolls into the station. No schedule shows a train arriving for another hour, but there it is. Guy runs through the booth and jumps onto the train. Train rolls off into the night. Nobody ever saw him again. Mal Oochi, the evil eye. This is common in a lot of Mediterranean cultures, but old Sicilians just take it to the next level. I remember hearing stories about evil wizards and witches who would cast the evil eye on me if I wasn't careful. I wore a cornicello up until I was like 13 to protect against it. Greece as well, but it's a common belief, not that they cast spells, but bad mood or bad luck in general, like they'll ruin your day kind of thing. It's believed that people do it without knowing when they feel jealousy against someone or some other negative feeling having to do with feeling inferior. Thanks for watching guys, subscribe if you're new here because I do these videos every single day and I'll see you all soon.